Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us on this wonderful Black History Month. It's 2022. Um, my name is Dwayne Winter. I am the community coordinator for the Nova Scotia Brotherhood. First, I would like to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship. I'd also like to acknowledge that racism is North America's original sin. That is the root of all current social inequities. Acts of reconciliation and reparations, both symbolic and substantial, are critical to our collective emancipation and the ability to live peacefully and sustainably on this land. So, as I said, my name is Dwayne Winter. I'm the community coordinator for Nova Scotia Brotherhood. Um, Tonight, we're celebrating the achievements of African Nova Scotians and immigrants living in Nova Scotia. Black History Month celebrates the rich contributions of people who have made a vast contribution to Nova Scotia. And they, as I say, they could be from the Caribbean, from Africa, or Indigenous African Nova Scotians. Tonight, we are celebrating Dr. OmiSoore Dryden, and her partner Gwen will be speaking on her behalf. First, I would like to set some adequate rules for the celebration. If you're, Gwen will be speaking first, and if you're not speaking, please make sure you're muted. Also, if you wish to have your video turned off, you may do so. The session will be recorded, so if you need it for yourself or other people at a later date, you can let me know via email. And I would also like to introduce my co-worker, Elizabeth Oweng Nakrumah. She's a wellness navigator with the Brotherhood. Elizabeth, you can wave or dance for us. There we go. And
Hi.
I'd like to thank Gwen and Dr. Dryden for being here and just allowing us to celebrate your life with you. Anyway, I'm going to pass the microphone over to Gwen, and thank you all, and please enjoy.
Thank you so much, Dwayne. That's great. It's great to be here this evening. Hi, everybody. I'm Gwen Bartleman. Among many things, one of the most important things in my life is that I am OmiSoore's partner, and happy to be so for the last 13 years. Actually, February has a really important role to play in our lives because it is when we had our first date 13 years ago. So it's nice to be here with you, OmiSoore, and to have this conversation. Yeah, thanks so much to Dwayne and to Elizabeth and the Nova Scotia Brotherhood. It's really an honor to be asked to do this, and a little unnerving because, obviously we have lots of conversations, but I don't think we've ever had a public conversation like this. And so I'm looking forward to getting to know a little bit more about you that I don't know. So we have some questions, and this will be really conversational. I think I took a lot of notes when I watched Sharon and Chris do their presentation earlier this month, and I really liked the way they had that flow. And I kind of want to steal their ideas and just pretend we're at the kitchen table having a conversation. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. So I'm just going to read a very brief bio of OmiSoore's. Dr. OmiSoore Dryden is a Black queer femme and senior scholar in the James R. Johnston Chair in Black Canadian Studies, the Faculty of Medicine at Dalhousie. She's also the co-lead of the new national organization, the Black Health Education Collaborative. Dr. Dryden is a board member of the Health Association of African Canadians and is also piloting the Black Studies Research Institute, which will be a center of excellence at Dalhousie, supporting the work of current and emerging Black researchers and scholars. So welcome, Dr. OmiSoore Dryden.
Thank you. You're right, it is a bit weird. And I also want to thank Dwayne and Elizabeth and the Brotherhood for nominating me or acknowledging me and spotlighting me in this platform. And I just want to say thank you. You just kind of are engaged in working with people and building relationships and doing the work and hoping that it's resonating and that you know, you're participating in this tapestry of work in a responsible way. And so to then be, you know, kind of given the spotlight is a bit surprising. So, and I know you can see I'm tongue-tied. I don't even know how to describe it. So
You're doing just fine. You're doing just fine.
Thank you so much.
Speaking of spotlight, should we spotlight OmiSoore and I, or do people prefer to have sort of the way that the screen is set up now? We can do it either way. Dwayne, any ideas on how we should?
Spotlight both of you guys.
Spotlight? Okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Pressure's on. Now I have to figure out how to do this. All right. That worked. Fantastic.
There we are. Hi.
Magical. Hi. Perfect. So, OmiSoore, I'm going to start from the very beginning because it's a very best place to start, as the musicals tell us.
Okay.
What wasn't part of your bio, and what I often hear you say when you introduce yourself, is that you refer to yourself as Veronica Dryden's daughter. So I would like you to start by talking about being Veronica Dryden's daughter, and talk a little bit about you know, what it was like to come from Kingston, Jamaica to London, Ontario as a child.
All right, so this is my mom. You see my mom, she's singing to me. I'm there too. Here I am. I'm this little button right there. I think she's singing to me, I don't know. And this was taken in Jamaica. What was it like? So my parents were supposed to leave me in Jamaica, actually. My dad had already come to Canada. He was a psychiatric nurse and was invited by the Canadian government to come and work in Canada, and initially had a job in Hamilton, Ontario. So it took him about a year to get his papers together. And then when he arrived in Hamilton, he was told that they gave the job away because they weren't sure he was coming. I think about it and I wonder what it must have been like to be in your late 20s, early 30s, get on a plane. This before cell phones, before texting, right? With a job letter in hand, only to arrive and have you be told that it's gone, the job isn't available. I don't know how my dad did that. Regardless, they ended up connecting him to the St. Thomas Psychiatric Hospital. And that's how my mom and I came to London, Ontario. That's how we landed in London, Ontario. And so, yeah, my mom was supposed to leave me with my cousin, actually. My mom was the baby of the family. And so my brother and I are much younger than many of our cousins. We're kind of like the same age as their kids. And so she was supposed to leave me, and literally just, you know, I still have all my paperwork, like my passport and all of those things. These are things you do for your kids before you leave. But she changed her mind and she said she didn't want to leave me. And so she brought me with her. When I was a teenager, I was really upset that she did that. When I was a teenager, I was like, why did you bring me? Why didn't you leave me? You know, nobody believes that I'm Jamaican. Why didn't you just leave me there? Only teenagers can get away with being so obnoxious. And so I have distinct memories. We came in December, and it was like, why would you come in December? And it was like, because the tickets were cheaper, obviously. Like, why would you come from Jamaica to Canada in December? And it was obvious that they were making this international move. So it wasn't like they were rolling in funds to be able to come at a warmer time of year. But I remember my mom telling me that when we landed in Toronto, because you'd have to go to Toronto to get on a plane to go to London, Ontario, that winter coats were waiting for us. So when we got off the plane, we had winter coats. And it wasn't until I think you and I moved to Sudbury that I got rid of a lot of those items. But in there was that winter coat that I had kept, assuming that I would give it to a young girl child in either for my brother or myself. But I remember her crying. I remember my mom spending time crying and telling me the stories of hardship. And we were just like this unit. As a family, and she told me the difficulties in finding a church in London, Ontario. Thankfully, we were close to historical Black communities in Ontario, like Buxton, Chatham, and so we ended up going to one of those churches, historical Black churches for a while. And I remember the stories. I remember, because I was just a kid and I had to stay close to home. I wasn't allowed to kind of like go out and roam around. I had to stay close to home, and really couldn't just kind of go and kind of play in the street. That was not the thing that I could do. If I wanted to hang out with friends, they came to our house. I could not just go to their house. And being the only Black child in the public school until my brother started. My brother was the first in our family to be born in Canada.
And sorry, how old were you when Wayne was born?
I was 6. Okay. I was 6. And I remember my mom and my dad telling me about the petition when we moved into our house on Maitland Street, the petition that the neighbors signed to have us to leave because they didn't want their property values to go down. And I remember like my dad getting into arguments with people on our street who would come and say really terrible
You know how
things.
they did the spotlight on Sharon a couple weeks ago?
Yeah.
The same one for OmiSoore.
Hi, Carla.
All right, I didn't realize I was off mute, sorry.
It's okay, it's good to hear your voice. I think it's just now that I'm thinking about it that, because they said we moved as a unit. So I think there was a way they talk about that time when I was older that really impacted how I kind of move in the world now, right? So the things that I remember very clearly were my parents being steadfast in knowing that they came to Canada with me for a particular reason, and also being steadfast in not tolerating any kind of racist abuse. I think I'm just kind of really putting some of those things together now. But it was lonely for a while because you just can roam, right? I couldn't, and I understand now. I understand my parents are just like, we don't know who these people are. They don't want us living here. We're already dealing with racist abuse when we go outside. Like, people aren't being really generous. People did become generous. There were also stories about generosity, but it was hard. It was very hard. And I can't imagine what it must have been like for a young couple and my parents to be so suddenly apart for an extended period of time, and then having to kind of reconnect with a child in a new place that was so very foreign and unfamiliar. Like, I just can't imagine what that must have been like for them. I do remember when my mom was pregnant with my brother, and I was very insistent that, I was going to have a little sister. I'm a Taurus, so I was just, and my parents tried to tell me that may not be the case, and I was like, oh, you're wrong. I'm gonna have a sister. And so when they came home with Wayne, I remember being insistent that they take him back because they brought home the wrong baby, that I was supposed to have a sister. And then I think I must have been not very welcoming to my brother until he was around 4. And then it was like, oh, you can't do anything to my brother. On TikTok, they have this thing where an adult's holding a child, and it's like, you see her? You see me? When you see her, you see me. When you see me, you see her. And that's what I was like, because Wayne, when he turned 4, and I was like, yeah, no, you do this to him, you do it to me, and then there's a problem. And he's just a beautiful person. I'm so happy that he's my brother.
Awesome. And Auntie, Ms. H. Drummond was also a very, very big part of your life and in my life subsequently. Talk a little bit about Auntie and how Auntie was in London, and when you were a child as well.
My mom. You would have to. My mom died in '98. She had breast cancer, and she was that story that you hear about Black women who are misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. So undiagnosed, I think undiagnosed is a better description, where her GP, he also undiagnosed me with Crohn's. That's a whole nother story, where her GP was like, oh no, it's nothing. Oh no, it's nothing. Over a year. And then he was like, okay, fine. If you insist, I'll send you to a specialist. And the specialist is like, okay, we need to do a biopsy. And that took another year. And so when she went to do the biopsy, the surgeon was like, we'll be about an hour, unless it's metastasized, then we'll be longer. So 4 hours later, she still hadn't come out of surgery. And so it was me and my brother and my aunt waiting. And Wayne and Auntie were just like, what's going on? And then they looked to me. And in some ways, this is how I met my mother's daughter. I was like, oh, I'm the one that needs to be the rock here. And I was like, it's fine. We're fine. Auntie, you're going to pray. Wayne, why don't you get us some water? Like that kind of thing. So then the surgeon came. He's like, you're right. It is cancer. It's metastasized. It was the end of the day. It's like, surgery went really long. Don't tell your mother anything. I'll see her tomorrow. And then he left. So I told Wayne and Auntie what happened, and everybody cried. And they just kind of looked to me and they were like, what are we going to do? And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. I'm the one that needs to make the plan. And so when we went back into her room, I went to get a resident and I was like, you need to tell my mother what's going on. We are not waiting until tomorrow. She wants to know what's this thing, what's that thing. Somebody needs to talk to her. This is unfair. So Auntie was always the person when she'd pick me up at dance class and people would be like, your grandmother's here. And I was like, that's not my grandmother, that's my auntie. She always just seemed to be older in her life, but she was the last one of all the siblings to live. She died October 2020. And I learned a lot more about Auntie when Mom was sick, because when you're a kid, you're just like, this is Auntie. This is somebody that knew you before you know yourself. And for some reason, she has the right to discipline you. And so, again, only a teenager could be like so audacious, be like, why are you disciplining me for? But she had that kind of fierce love that aunties can have for you, yeah? And, we loved her, loved her. But when Mom was sick, I was living in Toronto at this time. I couldn't wait to get to Toronto. I was living in Toronto at this time. And Auntie moved herself into our home, because Mom's home, and pretty much took care of her, made sure they went to the doctor's appointments together. This is gonna make me emotional. And then they would call me, because Mom was like, I can't remember what the doctor said. And then Auntie would tell me verbatim, he said this, he said this, he did this. And I was like, okay, here are the questions you need to ask next time you go. And I would come from Toronto as often as possible to attend her doctor's appointments. But it was me and Auntie with Mom when she died. We were in the room with her. I was holding Mom's hand. And so then imagine, so that was 98, and 2020 was 22 years, yeah? 22 years. So Auntie was almost, I had Auntie almost as long, I was older when Mom died, but Auntie was the significant old Black woman in my life, right? She was an elder. Like, Mom died at 64. My dad died at 64 too. Neither of them made it to retirement. And this is what I mean when I say that anti-Black racism can kill you. It has a physiological impact on your body. There's a reason why Black people don't make it to retirement. And they stayed in the same job. They didn't leave jobs. And only later, after they died, and I went through some of their employment papers, was I able to see just the relentless anti-Black racism they had to tolerate on the job, because people documented that stuff, assuming that it was just, the way to be with Black people in the workplace. So when you and I got together, actually, it made my relationship with Auntie better, and made Auntie's relationship better with me as well. Because I think she saw a kind of stability when you and I got together, that she was wondering, why are you always in Toronto? Why are you always moving around? Like, where are you going? When are you going to settle down? And I was like, I am settled. You have Wayne, I am settled, I'm good. But then she started to get more frail and had like her first surgery ever in her 80s, when she had to get her knee replaced. And she saw the way we showed up for her as a unit, even though she didn't come to her wedding. She saw the way we showed up for her as a unit. And then it was the three of us she was just like, oh no, these are my nieces. These are, right? Like she was really clear about that. And so one of my greatest loves after my mom was Auntie. And it was really like the 22 years since mom died, and most significantly the 13 years since we've been together. It's gonna make me cry. You know, she was living on her own. She was fiercely independent. One of the reasons we bought this house is because we wanted Auntie to come live with us. She was like the person, one of the last people who knew me when I was born, so knew things about me that I didn't know about myself. She was the one, she loved telling stories. So she would tell stories about mom and other members of her family from a perspective that wasn't mom's, like from a view that wasn't the way mom told the story. And she kept us connected to kind of our ancestral line in a way. And she was one of the smartest and most sensible people I've ever known. And she would often ask me to review papers for her, documents for her. And she would always catch when I read it wrong or interpreted it wrong. And I was like, why are you asking me? But I realized I was like fact checking for her, like just making sure she didn't miss anything. And I remember the last time I saw her. It was the height of the pandemic. It was September 2020. There were no vaccines. And I remember you and I were having a difficult conversation. I was like, I have to go to London, Ontario. I have to see Auntie. I can't wait until there's a vaccine. And so I traveled by myself. You can come. We have asthma. We weren't trying to get COVID without vaccines or interventions. And it ended up being the last time I saw Auntie. And you guys were able to talk on the phone. And it was a beautiful thing. I brought her food. We chatted, we told stories. I recorded her. I have recordings of her and her laughter and all of those things. And when we left, we both cried. And she was like, I just want to hug you. And I was like, I know, Auntie, I want to hug you too, but I can't, we can't. It's COVID and I was on a plane and I can't allow you to be sick. And then she died like the following week. But she died having yelled over the phone, I love you. I love you. I love both of you.
It was really beautiful. It really
Wasn't
was.
it?
Yeah,
Oh
it was
my
lovely.
gosh.
It was
You
lovely.
were,
Yeah.
we doing some Oprah things on here trying to get me crying. This is not what people called in for. What is this? What is
Well,
happening?
you're emotional, so I'm going to ask you to talk about Nathan in a minute. But I also just want to we'll get into a little bit about it. It's interesting, you know, you obviously were, you know, dealing with anti-Black racism and all of the systems, but that you were navigating in the medical system, right? And like, you know, advocating for your mom and advocating for Auntie before you really even knew that you were going to be, you know, getting into this realm and dealing with the medical structure and the medical systems. I think that's really interesting, right? So I would think that was probably a big spark of an impetus to make sure that you were in this space, right? Doing the work that you're doing. That's a guess.
My dad was a psychiatric nurse, yeah. And so whenever I was homesick, my dad would stay home. He's a nurse. He would check my blood pressure. He would start a chart. He would hold my wrist and put the thermometer under my mouth, and then he would make soup. So the one or two times that my mom, I'm sure it was more than that, but I remember one time my mom stayed home and she just would put her hand on my forehead and then move. I was like, you are not doing this right. You're supposed to do the thing like daddy does and the thing. I went back to school the next day because clearly I was feeling better. But, you know, my dad taught me a lot because my dad was doing his master's at Western University in science. So he had a science degree, a BA from BSc from UE in Jamaica, and he was doing his master's in science at Western. And this is at the same time that Philip Rushton was at Western and claiming that brain size and penis size equaled measurements of intelligence. And so my dad would be like, oh yeah, I went to go protest Philip Rushton today. And I was like, no, really? He's like, yeah. He's like, Rushton must go, Rushton, right? So these things. And I was like, oh, well, let me know when the next one is. And I'd hop on the train and I'd come to London and we do these things together. But he was the one that was like, that that showed me the connection between science and activism, right? As a way to confront systemic bias and systemic racism, right? He showed me that. So what's so interesting too, though, because when I started getting into my work on blood and blood donation and looking at the ways in which Black people and Black gay and bisexual men are negatively portrayed, right? These are anti-Black racist stereotypes that are considered good blood protocols around blood safety. I really kind of remember some of the things that he taught me, and that allowed me to kind of go into this rabbit hole of how we understand objective science, and how objective science is really based and continues to be based in many circles in these systems of racism that continue to suggest that that the problem that you're facing in health is due to your Blackness as opposed to due to anti-Black racism. So my mother having an aggressive form of breast cancer, which did not allow her to get to her 5th year, was like, oh, well, Black women just generally have more aggressive forms of breast cancer. And that's true, but that's not necessarily because we're Black women. That is because of anti-Black racism and misogynoir, right? It's because of the kind of anti-Black racism Black women face, the kind of systemic racism that prevents you from getting diagnosed sooner, the kind of systemic racism, right? Like I'm getting over COVID right now, and I've been in a number of meetings with predominantly white people who are like, well, I didn't get that document from you last week, you know, in a kind of pissy way. And I was like, oh, I had COVID. And I was resting, right? So there's this kind of sense that we don't even have a moment to get better, right? That the expectation that even while sick, we'll continue to work. But when we do that, it extends the length of time that we're sick. And then that's often interpreted in, oh, you just have a more virulent strain because of your Blackness, as opposed to we have a more virulent strain because of anti-Black racism, which prevents us from doing the kind of care that we need, and also compounds the stress levels in our body that we need to fight against whilst we're attempting to get well. And so watching the kind of racism that Auntie had to go through as an old Black woman, oh, I was incensed. I was incensed. And I really tried to wield the full power of my title, my PhD, like all of these things to be like, you will not speak to my aunt in that way. You will give her some grace and respect. And it was why it was so important for us to go together sometimes too, because you would use your whiteness and you would claim Auntie, you're like, this is my aunt. And so people would be like, what do you mean? And you're like, you will treat her right. So we would work together as this duo. So now to be in the Faculty of Medicine, you know, the first year I was here, I wasn't even here a full year before the pandemic. It was just hard for people to even agree to meet with me, because they were like, well, what does Black studies have to do with medicine? And so I spent a lot of time really mapping out the connection between Black studies and medicine. Part of that is research, right? The way we do research, the questions we're asking in research, the how we approach an archive to pull out the information that we need. And then to understand that just because these things happened in the past, so the first institution for medical education opened in Canada in 1824 in Montreal. Slavery in Canada didn't end until 1834. And J. Marion Sims, who's the father of gynecology, started his experimentation on enslaved Black women in the 1840s. So medical education is happening and growing at a time where Black people, enslaved Black women are being experimented on, aren't thought of as full human beings. We need to connect that to what's currently happening today that we're seeing in health disparities and health inequities. And watching that with Auntie, oh my God, watching it with Mom. And then being told, you know, we're being unprofessional or disrespectful because we're angry, you know, and that really connects to Samuel Cartwright. He's a white Southern doctor who claimed that enslaved Black people were mentally ill because they were fleeing slavery, right? So you're fleeing slavery, that somehow means you're mentally ill. We see that operating now when we talk about anti-Black racism and we're gaslit told that we're being too sensitive, told that we're misreading the situation, as if we don't actually have experiential, right? Like lived experienced that work to the equivalent of a PhD. We have PhDs in how anti-Black racism impact our bodies, but that really is a connection to the ways in which Samuel Cartwright in early colonial medicine viewed Black people as not knowing our own mind. And today, when people are saying, oh, are you sure? They're just a nice guy. Maybe you're just making too much out of this, not knowing our own mind. It's part of that same trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a good combination, you and I, and like you say, using my whiteness, excuse me, in those situations with Auntie, because it often destabilized those moments, and then they were completely caught off guard, and then we could make some progress, So yeah, no, agreed, absolutely. So I'm actually going to say, if you're up for this, OmiSoore, if people want to put something in the chat, if they have questions, we can just have a free flow of people with all of our friends around the kitchen table with us here. So if you do have a question, you want to plunk it to the chat, I'll keep an eye on it and go ahead and ask OmiSoore whatever you like. So completely off base, what does your name mean? What does OmiSoore mean? You're on mute.
I'm on mute because it's not been over 2 years. Honestly, I'm just going to side-eye myself. So my name is a Yoruba name, and it is an invocation. So if you're in Nigeria, around Oshogbo, or if you're around like that kind of area where a lot of Yorubans are, you'll actually see my name on street signs and corner stores and things like that. It's usually considered a last name there. But it means, and it's an invocation. So when you say it, Gwen, or when others say it, what they're saying is, I receive an abundance of blessings. And so this is why I say to people, oh no, it's only forever OmiSoore. There are no short forms to my name because it does not follow English practices. So if you cut my name short, you're also cutting the invocation. You're also taking the affirmation away and the intent of the name. It's an action, right? Like it's animated. It's an animation. It's something in motion. And so it's why I insist that you say my name. I don't care if you say it wrong. I'm happy to help you practice it. But yeah, OmiSoore, it means I receive an abundance of blessings.
Lovely, thank you.
And my family calls me Dawn.
Yeah, talk a little bit about Nathan and talk about our nephew and the importance of him in our life and what he means to us. And there you go, perfect. Nathan, yeah, so talk about this fine young person.
He's 14 now, so he doesn't even look like this anymore. He has like whiskers and his voice is lower. And he's so rude. He's like taller than we are now, the audacity. And so he came, we used to see him once a month. We've been with Nathan once a month since I've been with him once a month since he was born. I met him the day after he was born. I got in the car and drove to London, Ontario, picked him up, put him in my arms. I tell him this story all the time. Put him in my arms. And in that moment, we decided together that we would be the very best friends. He often rolls his eyes, which I tell him is unacceptable. But I remind him that he decided less than 24 hours old that we would be the very best friends. And so we moved here, oh gosh, when we first moved to Sudbury and we took the map out, oh Lord, what was he, 5, 6? 5? And we showed him on the map.
Yeah, I think he was 5.
His first question was, does this mean you don't see me no more? Oh my God. So
right in the heart, right in the heart.
You and I wept as well, Steve looked at the map. We're like, no, we will see you. And so when we moved here, we told him it would be a little more difficult, but we would still see him regularly. And COVID has been trying to trifle with that. But this picture is from shortly after we moved, and he came to spend a week with us in that apartment on Tower Road. Yep. It was like one of the hottest summers. Yep. And we took him everywhere. We took him whale watching in Briar Island. We took him to Kaji. We had Digby scallops and Digby. We took him to Queensland Beach. We introduced him to we went to the festival. There was a Black music festival on Harborfront, and he had an opportunity to meet Delvina, you know, and I was like, and then we took him to the Jamaican Day event, like on Bell Road. It's been so long, right? We've been to one, and then there was the COVID.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And he met Isaac there, and he met Barb, you know, and there was like music, and we actually had to leave that day to go back to Ontario. But he really is, he is the spirit that you see in this picture. He's always been quick to giggle. He's always been quick to ask you, how are you? What's going on? I was so happy that he had like 12 full years with Auntie. So that is someone he will always remember. And Auntie was his first death and his first funeral. And he spoke at her funeral and read a passage and gave a bit of a eulogy. I wanted him to have that experience with her and doing that. And he's just a cool kid. And he's growing up and he has his opinions. Apparently that's what's supposed to happen. And he came to see us over Christmas and stayed, I think, 5 days. And we had a bit of a struggle going back to Toronto with him because young Black boys are never young Black boys. They get read as young Black men. And so you and I had gotten to a bit of a tussle at security about the way they were aging Nathan and treating him in a bad way. But we had just watched the Colin Kaepernick series with him on Netflix, and it became a really good teaching moment with him to talk about what does that mean when you move through the world as a young Black boy, and how will you be viewed? And then we asked if he was, you know, if he felt taken care of by you and me, by his Aunt Dawn and his Uncle Gwen. And he often reaches out to ask us questions. He's that kid that's better in person than online with us. But when he's here, he always finds a way to corner one of us to ask like a big question that you're never prepared for. But he's a good kid. Like, he's a good kid, and we've often claimed him as our kid. I've often said to Wayne, "Ooh, thanks for the boy." and
Wayne says, "Get your own boy."
I know.
Get your own kid. My kid. Leave him alone. Yeah. Yeah. It's a great photo. I love that photo of him.
He was so happy. I was like, look, Aunt Dawn's name's on the door, and that I like, here, let me take a picture. And that's just how he busted out.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was great. I want to shift a little bit into Nova Scotia and how things have been. But maybe just talk a little bit about York, and talk a little bit about OISE. And, you really, I think, came into your activism quite a bit at York University. And then, oh, look at you. Boy, you're just ready with everything, right?
You said 3 words, and then I went and found pictures that would go. You didn't give me anything else. You're like, here are your key words, OmiSoore.
I don't want you to be overly prepared. Yeah.
Well, that's me.
Yeah.
In my high-rise jeans and my jerry curl. Yeah, it's a jerry curl. That's me right there with my finger in the air. You will recognize that look. I've done it in a lot of places. Excuse me. I was at York in the early 90s, and from London, Ontario, as you can tell, because I still have my jerry curls before I shave my head. And I just hung out with Black students. So here's the thing. I knew when I was in London, Ontario, you saw a Black person, you said hi. At that point, it's because they were probably from back home, right? These are people that you knew from home, you had to say hello to. So when I first moved to Toronto, I just said hi to Black people, which meant I kept walking around like this because it's Toronto, there's nothing but Black people. But when I went to York, I was like, oh no, I need to make sure that I'm hanging out with the Black Students Union or whatever. And so really fell in with this really great crowd of politically active Black students who also helped you learn about political activism. So I didn't come into this knowing, I showed up not having a clue about what the conversations were, what I thought, and then ended up participating in 2 protests. So one was with the student newspaper, Excalibur, which I think is still around, who had printed racist caricatures of a Black woman who was running for student council at that time. This is the same time that Jian Ghomeshi was at York. And I knew Gian. So we protested Excalibur. So my mom, who always did her schooling part-time, like she had her degrees from UWE, but when she came to Canada, she went, like my dad, went back to school and did it part-time because she was a full-time teacher. She was a public school teacher. So she took her March break off and she came to spend time with me in Toronto. And I was like, Mom, we're going to school. You're going to come to my classes. Don't put your hand up. Don't say anything in class. No. And we're going to a protest and you can't say anything in the protest either. And so that protest was Excalibur around this racist caricature that they printed about this Black woman. And so I said something, my friend said something, these things, and then my mom picked up the mic. And so she said something, and then they didn't know she was my mom. So all my friends came over and they were talking to her like we talk to each other. So a lot of F-bombs, a lot of swearing. And so halfway through, I was like, so I just want to introduce you to my mom. And then they all got really proper. Oh, hi, Mrs. Dryden, how are you? That was really great. And this is the following year when Black students young Black men were cornered in the student union by campus security, asked to produce ID because they did not look like students. Sound familiar? Right? We've heard this in other stories. And so when other students, not all Black students, when other students were like, what are you doing? Why are you asking them for ID? You're not asking me for ID. They called for backup. So more security arrived, and then more students showed up, and then they called police. This is not the first time York University has called police on Black people. So this is the protest that we had where we occupied the president's office at York University, again in the 90s. And we weren't leaving until we had a meeting with the president to talk about the racist profiling of Black students at York University. So we didn't have a meeting with the president, but we did have a meeting with all of the senior executive, VP, the provost, the VP academics, the vice president research, legal counsel, like all of it. We had it with every single member of the senior council, senior administration, and they agreed to our demands. At that point, the Center for Race and Ethnic Relations, which was the first university in York, was the first university in Canada to open an office to specifically address systemic racism called the Center for Race and Ethnic Relations. They had one full-time person, Chet Singh, some people may know who he is. And then we just said, you need two. You need to have two. So they hired Teferi Adem. And then shortly after that, I got hired in that office. And that's when I began my work in '92 about addressing systemic anti-Black racism in administration, in system places. And the other demand was, training and education of the security department, firing the security officers, and they were fired, not just for what they did here, but other things that they had, as you know, progressive discipline. And they had to make sure that none of the students who participated in this action were penalized academically. And that came from what we learned from the Sir George Williams affair that happened in the 60s. But this is really where I came into political knowing and also working in the Center for Race and Ethnic Relations, because it was my colleague Teferi who was like, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Part of the political work is also being strategic. And so yes, you need to occupy offices. Yes, you need to do this. And what's happening with the true Klux Klan, this is not what this is, right? So what's happening with the white supremacists who are passing themselves off as truckers, who are doing this work, this is not this kind of work. This is not this kind of activism. And so learned really a lot about the importance of learning about previous activist moments, learning from that, and then moving forward. And so a lot of what we see in Black Lives Matter really come from these earlier activist moments. And this was mine. This is where I did this work. And I took it into my research. So when I was at York, I was working full time and I did my MA part-time. I'm not that person that went all the way through. I didn't do my BA, my MA, my PhD all full time, no. When I did my BA, I worked. When I did my MA, it was part-time, which is why it took me so long to finish. My mom died during that time, so it just extended the time that I was finishing. And then I worked between my MA and my PhD. And my PhD, I did full-time. And that was I was grown at that point. I was grown when I did my PhD and I did it full time. But it infuses all of this, to me, works together. I like academic work, I like theory, I like all of these things, but for me, that's all part of the same movement of liberation and justice. I used to read the books off my parents' shelves, and I'm sure I shouldn't have, but they were there. So I read Black Like Me, I read who was then known as H. Rat Brown, Die and Die. I read James Baldwin. These were books on the shelf and I was a reader as a kid. So I would just take a book off and like tuck myself up someplace and read. And whenever I had questions about what words meant, my parents, so typical, they're like, look it up in a dictionary. But reading to me was as much a part of liberation and activism as the work. So.
And in Toronto, sort of during that time, you had a lot of time, and your crew was really some really interesting Black queer women that gave you a lot of inspiration, and you spent a lot of time with, and a lot of self-realization that you had with them as well. So talk a little bit about that group of people that you got to know in Toronto.
I get to drop names now, right? Hilarious. So this is where I met Faith Nolan. I met her in Toronto. Faith Nolan, Dion Brand, Angela Robertson, Laleiti Tamu, Dion Faulkner. This is where I met them. I'd moved to Toronto. In London, I was just this Black girl. That was kind of my existence. But then when I moved to Toronto and I really started hanging out with these African Nova Scotian, Black Caribbean, lesbians and gay men, who like Faith was full-time writing, doing music, starting land, like all of these things. And she had some of the most intense questions for me around how I would make sense of things in the world. And I don't know wasn't a good enough answer for this group. I don't know. They're like, why don't you know? You don't read the paper? Have you read this book? And so I would go away and read the book and come back. And of course there was a new book. I always felt like I was behind. But it's also where I came into like knowing myself as a Black lesbian and seeing people, and they weren't ashamed. And I always was interested in that, like, why did people think we were supposed to be ashamed about being Black or being Black or being Black and gay? I remember as a kid, my white friend's mother, I was not feeling good one day, and she thought she was being really attentive to me, and she's like, oh, you don't need to feel sad about being Black. And even as a kid, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, why would I feel like I just didn't understand? But it gave me so much information about her. And so, and I remember teaching in Sudbury, and I've always been out in the classroom as a Black queer woman in the classroom, Black queer femme. And I remember my students kind of being taken back by that. They were like, why don't you keep that secret? And I was like, well, my Blackness isn't a secret. My gender isn't a secret. Like, I don't understand. Like, this is how I move in the world. And if you know me, you know that I'm a gay woman. But Faith and Dion, Faith is where I began learning a lot about African Nova Scotians. Like, I knew about historical Black communities outside of London, Ontario, because those were our friends. Like, those were my parents' friends. That's the church we went to when we first arrived. We later went to United Church. So I knew that, but we would go to the historical Black church quite like at least once a year, and for an event. And my mom would sing. She used to sing and play in the choir, and I played piano. But I didn't know outside of Ontario really, because coming from Jamaica, we just kind of stayed in London and went from London to Toronto. So I didn't really know about other Black communities outside of Ontario. And so Faith really taught me a lot. Again, this kind of expectation that I shouldn't just be a sponge from her, that she shouldn't do this labor, that I really needed to go and figure it out myself. But it also brought me closer to my mom, because I was like, you know what, Mom? I'm hanging out with a lot of Black women from Jamaica, from Trinidad, from Nova Scotia. We're all lesbians. So who are the gay people in our family? Because I know I'm not the only one. And so she really started confiding in me in what I later learned to understand as an open secret, right? Like people, so this is why I'm always really cautious when people use this racist stereotype that Black people are the most homophobic people in the entire world, because that's not the case. We have different like the way we are with Black, queer, and trans communities in Black communities is not supposed to mirror the way it is in white communities. And so when I learned about, and we don't even use the same language per se. So when I learned about this kind of open secret in our family and, you know, folks in Jamaica and stuff like that, I was like, oh, and it really just kind of helped me settle. But, you know, as I grew older, you know, after Mom died is when I realized just how much of it, how many interventions she made with people who were like, where she kind of took on that teaching role. No, this is not how you're going to treat Dawn. Dawn is still Dawn, and this is how we have this person and this person and this person. So no, you need to like take that mess somewhere else. But some of those very people who were pretending that, you know, that I was a problem in some way, they're the ones that ended up sending their own kids to me over Facebook. They're like, oh, you're gay? Oh yeah, you need to call your cousin Dawn. And so I would just have like these people showing up in my DMs. Oh, hi cousin. I was like, oh, are we like, who are you? Who are you for? But it was able to kind of provide that home or a place to land or kind of well-being. In the same way that Faith and Dion and Angela and Dion and Lalaiti and Camille did for me, where I was embraced in this particular way where it's like, okay, this is who you are, this is how we move, and this is what we expect from you. We expect great things from you. And then sorry, let me drop one name. So Faith was going to land. She had some land in northern, like just outside of Toronto, a couple-hour drive. And she's like, you should come. And I was like, sure. She's like, you should come because Angela Davis is going to be there. I was like, sure, I could be cool about it. So I hopped in my little Saturn, my blue-black Saturn, and I drove. And I had my pajamas, and you know, I had a Walter Mosley book. So Angela Davis was like, oh, do you like Walter Mosley? And of course, it's the first Walter Mosley book I've ever read in my entire life. And I was like, oh, it's the first one. Of course, Devil in a Blue Dress, great book. But then she's like, oh, I'm playing Scrabble. Do you want to play Scrabble with me? No, because my strongest word is going to be cat. That's going to be my strongest word, Angela Davis, cat. And I'm not going to get a triple word score. And I will not embarrass myself this way. No, I will not. And then I pretended I knew how to cross-country ski. Who thought that was a good idea? She's like, let's go skiing. And I was like, sure. No, stop it. Don't do that. But she was great. Like we had these really great political conversations. But I was like, I just met Angela Davis. And then I just kind of like, you know, I talk about it now because it's been many decades, but at the time I didn't talk about it at all because it's weird just to be like, oh, I met Angela Davis. But again, meeting her and understanding that she was in the Black Panthers doing this radical work as a Black lesbian. And then that kind of took me to like Bayard Rustin and all these other folks. And that's when I realized we've always been in the movement. We've always been doing this work, but we've always been in our families and we've always been in our community. And for the most part, we've always been welcomed and embraced as members of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just, that's interesting, right? That whole myth that, you know, that Black people are more homophobic is just like, in our situation, we have experienced so much more anti-Black racism from my side of the family than we have homophobia from yours, you know, to the point where, you know, several members of my family I've cut out of my life because it was unacceptable and there was no movement, right? So it's, I always bring that up because I think it's really interesting to talk about that, right? It's like, no, don't put that racism forward because it's actually not true at all. And here's the experience. Again, you know, the old 1-2 destabilization. That's so important to do.
You know, it's enough when you get married to somebody or you're partnered with someone, it can cause a shift in, you know, your immediate family and extended family. And then, you know, add all of our uniqueness to that, then it could cause that as well. But it's really been our cousins and auntie who have just, you would have to fight them if you tried to do us any harm. But I've also seen that in community. That's really, you know, when I came to Nova Scotia, is when I started working on my blood project, the Got Blood to Give, around blood donation and the racism and the racist
Yeah.
homophobia.
And what year was that? What was the timeline for that?
2017. So I probably came the end of 17, beginning of 18, and I met Barbara Hamilton Hinch. So I had called, I'd reached out to someone about wanting to come and talk about the project. And then they connected me to Barb. And then Barb was like, well, you have to come. You can't do this work from afar. And I was like, I'll come. She hooked me up at the Doubletree in Dartmouth. I came with the then project coordinator, Agatha. She hooked me up with Bernadette and Shelley Fashan. And she was like, Bernadette Hamilton Reed and Shelley Fashan. She's like, these we're going to work it out. We'll set up meetings for you. That's where I met Dr. David Hawes and many other people. Harvey, Delvina's partner. I'm sorry, last names are just going out of my head. Harvey did a great interview with me, but this is where I met people. And then, and we held the meetings in communities. So we were in the North Preston Community Center. We did one at the library, and we did a third one in another place, in the North End Library, and the third. And of course, it was like the worst snowstorm. It was March. It was like we were landing through a snowstorm, and we had to get a rental car that had winter tires on it. And as soon as we landed, I was like, oh, Gwen, you have to come back with me, right? I was like, we need to come. And then I got invited to do a keynote at Halifax Pride about my blood research. So we made it a family vacation. So it was you and me, my brother and the nephew, and we stayed at an Airbnb on, not Gottingen.
It's the North End. There's the North
Yeah,
End.
just off of Gottingen. We stayed at an Airbnb. And again, had an opportunity really to hang out with and meet. Oh, that's also. So I met Elle and we connected with Elle when I was here in March. That's when I met Robert Wright. And Robert's like, yes, let's do something together. And so reconnected with him at Halifax Pride. And really just started to, I met so many people, Kate McDonald, so many people, I'm missing people, my apologies. But it was really great for folks who were just like, oh no, we're interested in the project, but we're kind of interested in you. Like, what are you doing? How's it going? And so I'd come out a couple of times for the research before this job was posted. Actually, the first time it was posted, I shared it with other people. And then other people were like, no, you really should think about it. So when I came for the interview, the part I really liked about the interview for the Johnston Chair, like, why do you like parts of the interview, was the community meeting, which was held at the Buddy Day Center. So that's where I met Sylvia Paris and Lynn Jones. She came and Robert was there. And it was a great community meeting because they asked questions. They were just like, who are you? You know, if we're gonna vouch for you, what are you gonna say? What do you say about this? I've only ever wanted to do work with Black people. That's from the whole time I was in school and doing my PhD. And, you know, what are you going to do in your PhD? Oh, I'm going to be a professor. What kind of professor do you want to be? I want to be a professor who works with Black people. I carry this with me, right? Like this moment here, because I didn't have a Black professor until I started my PhD. And so and many of the students, a number of students that I did this work in are professors now at Brock, at McMaster, right? Like we studied together. And so to be in that interview where they were like, all right, sis, let's connect, let's build relationships. How are we going to do this? And that's really been important to me. I'm a little angry at COVID because it's stolen the opportunity for me to really kind of be back in community with people. And so we do our best online. But I feel, I feel embraced by community, not because of accolades, like those are those are nice, but also in the ways that they ask me to be accountable. OmiSoore made a mistake here. We need to talk about why you did that and how are you going to change that? And I was like, you know what, you're right, I did. So tell me the best way to be accountable and how to move forward. This is what I think. What do you think? Let's do that together. Because I'm not passing through. We bought a house. Like this isn't a stop on to somewhere else. This is a place where we will make home. As much as we will always be from away, it is a place where we will make home. And so even in the research that I'm doing and the work that I'm doing, I want to make sure that we're not perpetuating this, attempted erasure of the very important presence of African Nova Scotia and Black Scotians. Because how do we start? We can't perpetuate that, right? So
No, I absolutely remember when you were, just about to write your comps, kind of very, very early days in our life together. And I just said, well, what's your dream? Like, what do you want to do? And you're like, I'm going to work with Black people. Everything I'm going to focus on is Black people. I'm going to teach about Black people. I'm going to teach to Black people. And all of those things have come to fruition. So talk about an abundance of blessings. It's pretty interesting. Oh, that's a great shot of us. I love that.
I know, isn't that great?
Hi, Nathan. It's really interesting to, you're a little cavalier about it, but really it's impressive to watch that 13-year journey, and you are exactly where you said you would be, and it's something I really admire. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I have a lot of admiration for you and what you do, but I hope you know that. I hope I tell you enough. Yeah.
You do. Thank you.
Talk a little bit about the Johnston Chair and what it meant to apply and get that and really to make the decision to move to Nova Scotia and make home here. And also just a little bit about you talked about this a little bit already, but the importance of putting yourself forward as a Black queer femme, and you also say you were the first queer James R. Johnston Chair, right? So that's another aspect that's really important to you as well. So talk about that if you can.
I remember when I first started reading about the Johnston Chair, I was like, oh, that's so cool. I would love to do that. I would love to have a research chair that could be all Black all the time. And because when you look at my resume or my CV, all you see is Black, 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 Black. And it was hard applying for jobs and having to present even though all of the work I did had Black in the title somewhere, but I'm applying for a job that wants you to look at racism or look at equity. And so I'd have to say, oh, no, I can do that too. That's also included in this work I do on Blackness, only to lose out to, a white person who was doing racism in a particular way. So when I saw the Johnston Chair and I saw, oh my gosh, it's in the Faculty of Medicine, I thought, I could really like do this. I could really like kind of bring all of my things to bear in this. And so we spoke. We were like, we had just come back from Sudbury. We were like, what are we going to do? Sudbury was a very difficult place for me. It started to impact my mental health. I had to seek assistance in caring for my mental health. Before we moved out to Sudbury, we had assumed that we could just live anywhere. But the thing that Sudbury taught me is that I need to live in vibrant Black communities. Like I need to be somewhere where there are vibrant Black communities where you can work together to find, you can collaborate on being resilient against the racism. And we just didn't find that in Sudbury. We used to do things separately. We used to live a separate way. And we went to Sudbury, we went to the grocery store. You went one way, to get the things on the list. I went the other way to get everything else that met my fancy. And I remember this white guy just walking up to me, getting really close to me, clearly pre-COVID, and gawking and in wonder say, I've never been this close to anybody that looks like you with hair like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't actually think we can live anywhere. And it just got worse from there. And so when this job came up, I was like, okay, I think I know a little bit about Halifax. It's definitely not Sudbury. There is, a historical African Nova Scotian in Black Scotian communities. This will be different. And of course, you have never said, don't apply for that job. You have always said, is this the job that you want to apply for? And then said, go ahead. You have moved your career for mine. Like that's a huge thing. And so when I applied, I was like, I just need to be all of me. I need to talk about my blood research. I need to talk about how systemic anti-Black racism manifests within medicine and in healthcare, what the intersections are, Black studies and medicine, things like that. And really think about what would be my dream work? Like, what are the things that I would want to do if I had this position? And all of it was just lovely. It was a lovely experience. It was warm. It was a warm day in the 2 days we were here. As I said, the community meeting was really great. Met a lot of folks. And then we had to forget about it. I had to let it go. I had to not worry myself over whether it was okay. And unlike other academic positions, you rarely know who you're going up against. But I knew the other two people that were also applying for this job. And so I had to let it go because they're brilliant. And I was like, oh, I'm not going to get this job. You know, that's okay. I'm sad. But, you know, I learned a lot in the process, which you always do when you apply for a job. So honestly, when that call came through, I had to sit down. I was out in the street. I had a meeting and that call came through and I was like, oh, remember we would practice? I was like, let's practice getting the call. And we would practice and then I would just laugh hysterically. I was like, shut up, it's not going to be like that. But then the call came in.
I think the first time we rehearsed, you just screamed. And I was like, okay, that's not how you answer the phone. Yeah, definitely don't answer it that way. Classic.
So when the call came in, I just sat down. I was like, oh, hi, yeah, sure. Let me just sit. I had to go sit down. And then our entire life changed. Like our entire life changed. And we found that place. And I lived here mostly by myself for 4 months, which I will never let you forget. And I often tell people, you left me. And I had
even though when I came, I would cook and you would have meals frozen, ready to go until the next time I came. Yeah.
Because you left me.
It's good narrative. We'll just go with that.
It was good. And obviously it was the way it needed to be because it meant that I really needed to be here on my own and kind of establish a thing. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing I wanted to do when we came, we didn't have a house, like we were living in an apartment, was have a reception for the Johnston family. And so we did it at work. We did it in the department and we ordered food in and we had them all come in. I was in Toronto actually on the phone with members of the Johnston family saying, hi, this is who I am. I'm the most recent chair. And, you know, we'd like to have this thing for you. And it was a bit of a family reunion for them. And there was singing and we had food, we had candles, we had a birthday cake for Mr. Johnston. And it was a lovely event just to meet them and to be embraced by them and to be taken hold of by them, right? And again, because it recreates this kind of responsibility, like this is a real person. And so I do feel a responsibility in honoring his legacy in a way that I think is, you know, most authentic for me and the work I bring into medicine. And not just his legacy, there were 3 other chairs who did phenomenal work who are, oh my gosh, Esmeralda Thornhill, David Devine, and Fua Cooper. Listen, if I could just try and keep up. And so, you know, I had to really make sure that I kind of knew myself in that and add to the work that they had done. I always feel like it's an addition, not a replacement. And I think, you know, I think it's been okay.
Talk a little bit about the chair chats that you've had with the Black students and what that's meant and how that's worked out and just how that's fed into your vision for being the chair.
You know, the thing that really, you know, chair chats is kind of old school. It's kind of like back in the day where, you know, you would get together and you would talk about all things politics and all, you know, and you would just kind of like educate each other and be like, what about this man? And you would like debate ideas and things like that. But you and I were talking, I was like, I want to do something for the students. What do you think? And you were like, well, why don't you do this thing around, you know, what do you want to do? So I told you and you're like, well, how about this title? Or what do you think this would be like? I wanted to make sure that Black med students, because this is before there was a Dalhousie Black Medical Students Association. And so I wanted to create a space for Black med students to come, be fed. I'm an excellent auntie, yeah? I'm an excellent, I will feed you. I will make sure you go home with food. I'm an excellent auntie. And so I wanted them to come and get food and be in a place where they could speak to each other and have some sense of safety, cultural safety, right? Sense of safety. With, Dr. Dryden, they call me Dr. Dryden, who was feeding them and sending them home with fruits and vegetables and a meal for the next day. And it was, we had like 4 people that first time. So I opened it up a bit to Black students in all health professions, nursing, pharmacology, dentistry, and grad students. We had maybe 5, 6 people. Until this year. This year, Dalhousie had the largest incoming class of Black students, I think 12 or 13, one at New Brunswick campus. And so the first one we were able to hold in person, the students who've been coming for 3 years, they were in Med 3, came around the corner and they were like, well, who are all these people? Like, it was just to see that kind of growth, yeah? And because of the pandemic, we moved Chair Chat online. And that's when I started getting, so right before the pandemic, I was in British Columbia giving a talk at the University of Victoria and the University of British Columbia. So the University of Victoria is actually when we had our first hybrid Chair Chat. Who knew who knew we'd be doing this all through the pandemic, where I had Black students at the University of Victoria. They also have a medical school with the Black students at Dalhousie, and then they got to speak to each other. I tried to really stay out of that space. It was beautiful. And then I went to UBC and I held a Chair Chat at UBC, and it was packed. There was 30 people, grad students, med students, students of science. So then when so I came back, finished out the Chair Chat, and then the pandemic hit. And I was like, oh, students aren't doing okay. This pandemic is really hard, the isolation. So we kept, and then Mr. Floyd was murdered. Like, all of these things were happening simultaneously. Black students were not okay, and Black med students were not okay. And so we held the Chair Chats practically through that entire summer. And it included people from across the country, which I hadn't expected. And they really just spoke about what it meant to watch yet another Black man die on TV, and to go into medical school and talk about, this race-based medicine, and often being the only Black medical student in their year, in their cohort, and that kind of thing. And so it really started to develop this kind of connection. But at this time was the first time the Black Medical Students Association in Canada formed. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So do you guys know, are you going? And then the Black Medical Students Association at Dal formed. I was like, oh my God, what do you need? Anything? Do you need money? Do you need food? What do you need? But when I started it, it's because nothing really was in place. And I was hoping this would be a place where they could be. I have a feeling that I won't need to continue to do Chair Chats because they'll have these things, they could do the things they do, and that's great. Apparently you don't always need to go to aunties for dinner. You go and cook for yourself.
Totally true. Yeah,
but
that's
really why I know what it meant for me to be at York and to be in a cohort of Black students. I was a poli-sci undergrad. And what that meant to be in a classroom with other Black students and to study together. I became a better student. And it's the thing I wanted to be able to support for Black students here, because medical school, it's so high, right? They're high stakes. Sorry, a little bit of brain fog. High stakes. To successfully graduate and then start your career. And so if I could offer them a little space once a month with hot food and some drinks and some music, I like my music, where they could just feel like they could decompress, then let me do that. And, again, we were in an apartment, so it's not like we could have them over to like now we're in a house, hang out in the basement, come, there's like things we could do. but yeah, if there was a way we could do that, and it's been really great. I think you would have to ask them. I've really enjoyed it, so much so that people try to get in on it, right? So Barb's like, "Can I come?" And I've invited Dr. David Haas and Dr. Gaynor Watson Queed, and so they can meet Black docs. This is before we started the Sophia B. Jones mentorship program. So all of these things have kind of come into place, which is great. And it's just, I can hardly wait till they go to the convocation. I got my robes. I'm going to be loud. I'm going to be loud. I'm going to call them by name. I'm going to do all those things because you should be cheering for them. I love convocation, and to see our students, to see our young people crossing the stage. Yes, I want to make sure that we're having a celebration.
No, absolutely. I would have to say chair chats are an extreme success, because I remember walking behind a group of first-year medical students, Black medical students, walking to chair chat, and they were just like, there were probably 10 students walking together to, just to hang out with you. It was fantastic. It was wonderful. So, and I think that's the success. The success is that they don't need auntie anymore. They'll always need auntie, but not as much as they did at the beginning. But that's what you want to see. And they will, much like you did as a younger person being mentored, they will go on to mentor. And that's, that's the way it should work. So yeah, I think that's such a great thing.
We need to tell people, you always come with me. You're the one that goes to pick up the food. To carry the food in, to get it set up, and then you go back to work, and then you come back, right? So they have chair chat, but now they're meeting the undergraduate medical education person. Yeah.
Which is also really important for me, is that they know that they also, when I'm actually in an office, that's a space where they can go as well and get support, and know that there is a person there who's on their side. It's important to me, right? Yeah. So it's interesting. That's good. I want to shift a little bit, and can you talk? I'm going to ask you to talk about your work with certain associations, and so I'd like you to talk a little bit about your work with Hawk and what that's meant, and your relationship with Sharon and Carla and all of that.
I met Carla. She was a research assistant on a project I was working on, and Carla is a badass. And has always been. Oh, I'm sorry. Carla is like really fierce and has always been. Sharon, I met before I even got my first paycheck.
I'm sorry, Sharon got the Order of Canada recently.
Yeah, that Sharon.
Right.
Sharon, our friend Sharon.
Sharon
got the order. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My friend, I'm claiming her. My friend Sharon. I hadn't even gotten a paycheck yet. I was on a train to Montreal, were we on a train to Montreal, or were we on a train to Kingston? I was going to give a talk. You were with me. And I was working on a grant, a Nova Scotia grant. And I was like, I have to apply. And so I called Sharon. They were like, you should think about partnering with the Health Association for African Canadians. So I sent it to Sharon, cold emails, right? The worst. Hi, you don't know me. I'm in the incoming chair. I want to, this. Sharon's like, call me. And on the train, was like, this is how we're going to walk through this grant. This is what we're going to do. This is what you need to know. This is how it's going to work, right? Let me give you a quiz on, right? This is why how you're framing it in this way doesn't necessarily match the realities of what it means to live in Nova Scotia. And I was like, I need someone to tell me that, because I don't know, I'm from away, I'm learning, yeah? And from that moment, when you feel got, for that moment, I felt got. I felt absolutely got. And so I was like eager. I was like, can I be on the Hawk board? Well, let's think about it. Oh no, can I be on the Hawk board? And so went through the interview and all of that with Donna. I love Donna. Donna is also a badass. And they were like, yeah. And this is when Veronica was co-president, from the Black Social Work Association, and I'd missed a couple of meetings because I was really just trying to figure out how to manage all the work. And Veronica was like, listen, if you're going to be a board member, then you need to come. I was like, you know what, Veronica, you're right. I cannot coast on this. And so working with the Health Association for African Canadians is fantastic. I love it. And it sucks that we've had to do it online, but then I got to meet everybody, right? Like I've had an opportunity to work with people, and just really, it reminds me of the kind of meetings my parents used to have, because kids were always around. there was always food, and they were always solving problems. Somebody needs something. Okay, how do we get it? Oh, we do this. Do you know someone? Yeah, I'm going to call someone at so-and-so. Okay, yeah, that's great. Let's do that. And that's what this is. And I was like, okay, yeah, I could do that. I don't have contacts here, but I'm developing them. Now I've developed more contacts. And they were like, oh, you know, so when they say, OmiSoore, can we get something? I'm like, absolutely. What do you need? Let's figure this out. And how can I help? And how can I intervene? And so I was saying to someone today that I feel blessed. I am busy. Oh my goodness, busy. But it's the kind of busy that fuels you. Do you know what I mean? There's sometimes busy that just leeches from you, right? Leeches, and you're weaker at the end of it. You know, sometimes you can hug someone, you leave, you feel more tired. And then other times you can hug someone, you leave, you feel more energized. That's the work that I feel like I'm doing.
Yeah,
and Auntie told me a long time ago that if that's the work I can get, then I truly will live a blessed life. But being able to have difficult conversations and community, being able to, you're miscommunicating, but you stay with it until you realize, oh, that's not what you're saying. You're saying this. No, that's not, we're saying the same thing. That's what I meant, right? Like that takes a certain amount of trust and respect to be able to kind of stay there and be like, I don't understand what they're saying. And then you can get frustrated, not at the person, but because you don't understand, but you still do that kind of thing. I feel that that's the kind of work we do in HONC, right? It's the kind of work that I get to do with Sharon and Carla and David and Gaynor and Bart. Like there's just such fantastic people where it's just like, I don't understand. They're like, we didn't understand what you said. And I was like, oh no, I meant this, I'm sorry. And then, you know, you go on, and the only thing lacking is being able to do it over food regularly. You know, when you have like jerk chicken in your hand and you're like just talking to someone and you get the red stripe out of the beer, not us, but others get the red stripe out of the beers, you know, out of the fridge. That's what's missing. And I'm hoping we'll be able to do that. It's the thing I feel, that's the only thing I feel is lacking, is not being able to do more of those in-person pieces.
Yeah. And I mean, your schedule is so compressed and intense, but, you know, and because we're at home, you know, and you're upstairs and I work in the basement, but, you know, if I'm in the kitchen and I sometimes can hear meetings going on, and I may not necessarily know what's happening, but when I hear laughter at some point, I always know you're in a HONC board meeting, because there is always laughter, which is, you know, that's a nice thing, right? That's a really nice thing, because I know these are not easy times or easy meetings. And I know you're all working through some stuff, but you're always laughing, and it's a nice thing to hear, right? It is nice. Yeah. So, okay. So the complete polar opposite. Can you talk a little bit about the 5 minutes that you're on the Nova Scotia Health Board? Trust and respect, and oh, look, you're off the board. So yeah, I mean, that was an interesting moment in time. So yeah, talk about that a little bit, and talk about the community response to that as well.
You know, the previous chair of the Nova Scotia Health Board, Frank, he reached out to me quite some time ago, and he was like, you know, do you want to do this? And I said, I do, but I need to wait. I can't do it right away, and I want to make sure that I do it properly. And I also wanted to speak to a couple of people to see if they thought that I would be the right fit. Because if I wasn't, then I was going to suggest another name. Because you don't always need to be the one, right? Like there's lots of people. And so folks are like, yeah, do this. I think it's a good fit, and I think it'd be good to have you on. So we did the paperwork, you and I. I think I had 3 different phone calls with 3 different ministers of health. And then I got this email saying, oh, it's coming to the floor tomorrow, so you're going to be in the news. I was like, okay. And then it happened. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then realizing that it'd be the first Black person ever to sit on the Nova Scotia board. And I was really clear that I was like, oh, that's great. I think that's fantastic. But don't think that I replace an African Nova Scotian or a Black Scotian person, right? Like, don't think that that's what's going to happen. We need to make sure that this is properly representative. And had a really great time working with Stephen Augustine from Sydney, who's Mi'kmaq, on the board. So then we get that email from the minister, when the government changed, from the Minister of Health saying, you know, please see attached email we're just like, we're ending the board. Don't say anything until the announcement at 10.
That's when Houston came into power, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I'm still bound by that, but I called you and I was like, I was like, come read this email. Tell me if I'm reading it correctly. And I did that before 10 o'clock. So I don't know if I'm reaching anything at this state. I was so disappointed. And I think I was frustrated because we were just started doing, you don't understand, like Stephen and I did some excellent work. We were at one point, we were the only two, like an Indigenous and a Black person on the board. That's it. There was us. And at one point, one of the other board members, a white board member, said, we need to think about security and policing in hospitals in light of what we're learning about how police are with Black people and Indigenous people. So we need to think differently about security and safety in hospitals that could be community-based maybe, instead of the system-based. And that didn't come from me. And if you've seen my Twitter feed, you know, it was like ACAB, ACAB, ACAB. So that didn't, defund, dismantle, disarm, abolish. That didn't come from me. But it came from the conversations we were having around doing community work, like mutual aid, right? Like that kind of thing. And so when the letters came out, we all just started calling each other. And I had a number of the board, my fellow board members call me, white people, who were like, I'm so sorry we didn't get an opportunity to work together. And Stephen and I, spoke as well. I wish I could say I was proud of the work we did, but I don't feel like I actually got a chance to do more work. So I don't feel like I actually was able to do something to say, oh, look, I made this intervention. It's such a weird thing. So I was a little annoyed that this past week when this CBC News article came out about this report that was written on racism in healthcare that the Minister of Health was going to be reviewing and the administrative committee was going to be reviewing. I wasn't annoyed about the report, but I was annoyed that they were now considering this. And I was like, well, we were already considering this and you've just put us back a year or 2 years. I was thrilled with what Dr. Gaynor Watson Creed said in that article, in that news report. And there was another physician, I don't know his name right now, what they said. Like, I thought all of that was really, really important. There are many voices speaking on this, mine is just one. But I was annoyed because I thought, what a waste. In the Black family meetings, they were also like so strongly committed to making sure that not only was the government responding to the Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs and how that needed to be dealt with, but like thinking again about representation in Nova Scotia Health, in the decision-making space. So I know this is what governments do. I don't think this is what this government needed to do. I think there was another way the government could have said, oh no, look, we're a new government, we're gonna do A, B, C, D, and E. This kind of heavy-handed tactic that was unnecessary, only now to say, oh look, we're responding to this report. It puts them behind. And I asked the Minister of Health, can you please explain to me what experience the administrative body you put together has in equity, diversity, inclusion? Can you explain this to me and what experience they have with addressing systemic racism in health and how they're going to do that as a 4-person board? And I never received an answer. And then, I decided to continue focusing. I decided to focus on the work of the Black Health Education Collaborative, but it's work that still needs to happen. And it's long-term work. It's that thing that Teferi reminded me of. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's a thing I really respect the hell out of Sharon for, because she does this work, she understands it's a marathon, and she goes into it with like the same commitment that always seems unwavering. Lynn Jones is the same way, Mayanne Francis is the same way. They've been doing this work diligently. Senator Bernard, diligently, seemingly unwavering. And I'm like, okay, I can do that too. I can think of the long game. And so it helps me think strategically about where to speak, when not to speak, where to work, where not to work, and when to rest.
That's the most important part, when to rest. Yeah, that's a lot of conversations about why aren't you resting in our house very often. Yeah.
You're telling people business.
No, not me. I wouldn't do that. Yeah, I mean, I think we've covered quite. Dwayne was very kind and sort of gave some guiding questions, and I think we've covered a lot in what we've talked about. And I also want to leave a little bit of time for questions from people who are attending today. So maybe we'll start wrapping up a little bit. But one of the questions that Dwayne suggested, which I think is a great one, and you can maybe talk about projects that are coming up and things that the contributions you want to continue to make. So the question is, what are your intentions over the next 5 years to broaden the horizon of achievements?
Oh.
And contributions to communities in Nova Scotia.
So I think you're supposed to say like big things, right? I feel like stumped by that. I think, my commitment remains the same, right? To work with Black people about Black things on Black things.
All about everything.
Yeah. I am excited about the Black Studies Research Institute. It was such a pleasure working with a bunch of people to bring that, to make that happen. And I'm excited about the fact that it'll be the first that I know of that focuses on STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. I think there's a way that when we think about Black studies, we think about literature, we think about fine arts, we think about music, we think about theater, but we don't necessarily think about STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. But there's fantastic work happening around Black studies. And by Black studies, I mean, Black thought, Black methods, Black practice, Black action, Black analysis, right? Like these are the things that I mean, in medicine. So some of the work that I'm doing with the Black Health Education Collaborative and my colleague, Dr. Ani Norum, she already had that idea, and she came and she's like, you're the Johnston Chair. We met when she came to my going away party in Toronto. Remember, Pierre brought her, right? So we had this going away.
I do remember, yeah.
Right? And Pierre's like, oh, I want to introduce you to Ani. And I was like, oh, I know you. I see you online because everything's on Twitter. She's like, yeah, we should talk. Let me know when you land. Like, that's how we met. And when you talk to Ani, she's like, I always meet people at parties. And I was like, oh, we should start doing that more, meeting people at parties. And so doing that work is like, I'm just watching it happen. And I'm just excited to be part of it because it really is kind of making these interventions. But so it might feel like these big things, but they are all these small steps that have led to these big things. And they're small steps that we've taken or joined or continued from others who have begun, are doing, and are continuing, right? So we are adding our steps and our voices to that. And so what does that mean? It means for the Black Studies Research Institute and the Black Health Education Collaborative, it means working with community people, community partners, community scholars, community elders. So creating greater relationships there. It means structuring spaces in universities or healthcare so that they are more welcoming for us, for our communities. And it means mentoring young researchers, whether they're undergraduate or master's students. So we've had an opportunity, myself and Ani, to set up a team that has Barb Gaynor, Delia from Winnipeg, Sume, who's our director. And we've brought in research assistants, and they've sat and looked at us and been like, this is the only time in my entire academic career that I've gone to a meeting like this, and it's all Black people, and not just all Black people, all Black women, right? And then, Barb and Gaynor and I are working on this project on Black studies and breast cancer, and we're able to work with a medical student and a research assistant, and they're like, wait, I get to work with all, like Black people? Oh, thank you, David. Are you leaving? Bye, David. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, you should read the article by Ron Milne about David Devine in his lecture at the 25th anniversary. It's brilliant. It's on my Twitter. You should go read it. So I think I want to do that. And I continue to want to do work with Black, queer, and trans folks. And I include, so when I say Black Studies Research Institute and the Black Health Education Collaborative, I mean all of our Black people, right? I mean Black women and men, Black LGBTQ folks, Black folks with disabilities, Black young, Black old, like I mean all of our people. So I continue to want to do that work. I have another 3 years in the Johnston Chair. I don't leave DAL. I have a tenured position. I'm tenured. And so I'll stay at DAL in the Department for Community Health and Epidemiology. I already said I bought a house. We bought a house. We here. But those are the kind of steps, right? Like, I want to kind of do that everyday work with Black community in Blackness, doing Black things. And if that contributes to the Research Institute, then fantastic. If it contributes to the Black Health Education Collaborative, fantastic. You know, I don't want my conversations only to be with predominantly white decision makers, and they are, and that's okay. That's part of the work I have to do. I also want my conversations to be with Black youth and Black communities. For whom, you know, these spaces should be more welcoming and less harmful. So part of, you know, continuing with that administrative work, which is very, very important, but also that community work, which really is the thing where I feel most at home, where I can wear my blue lipstick and my mismatched earrings and have my blonde locks and wear my cute shoes and, you know, have a meal with people where I just get to be OmiSoore.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it will be like, I mean, I know together it's something that we really see is, you know, really getting out to the parts of Nova Scotia that were thwarted. We were really thwarted in all of the adventures we had planned. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to doing that with you.
We need to go to Guysborough, Whitney Pier, back to Digby, Sydney. We have the map.
Oh my gosh.
We need to go to those, you know, New Glasgow, back to Truro. We have places to be.
We do, and we'll do it for sure. Absolutely. This was amazing. I loved it. I did not know that you went cross-country skiing with Angela Davis. Hilarious. I told you I was going to learn something about you that I didn't know already. I think I will just pass it back to Dwayne in a moment and just open it up for conversation with others. But honestly, OmiSoore, like you know, you are literally half my world. You are my favorite person, and I am so proud of you. And to be on this journey with you and to see you get to this point, it's stunning, and you are stunning. And you have been a massive change in my life. And and you know, you say, oh, I changed careers for you. I did all of this for you, but I wouldn't have changed a thing, right? And, you know, even after Sudbury, I wouldn't have changed a thing, as horrible as that was. And the fact that we are here now in this place, which is just one of the most beautiful places with the most beautiful people, I'm really happy we're here, and I'm really happy to be here with you. And so I am so proud of you. I admire you so much, and this was really a blast to do with you. So thank you for talking with me. It was really fun.
Weston, you did so good. You had all the questions. You had Oprah.
I know, do this stuff. I put on a tie and all that stuff. Yeah.
I know no one realizes that you're in the basement and I'm upstairs, which pretty much reflects how we do the day.
Is it? Fake it till you make it. That's it. That's the name of the game. So I'll pass it over to Dwayne. And again, thanks to Dwayne and Elizabeth and
thank you
for having us.
Thank you to Gwen, and thank you to Dr. Dryden. You have lived a beautiful life. Just amazing. I've learned so much. So right now I'd like to open the floor to anyone who'd like to ask any questions or anything. Please.
Carla, that's a lovely note. Thank you.
You know, Carla's trouble, you know that.
Oh, yeah.
But you know, I don't lie either.
Why do you think we get on so well?
But she's real. But she's real.
I don't lie either, so it's true.
Excuse me. I must be getting better because we did all that talking and my coughing didn't take over. So,
Sharon had her hand up.
oh, did she?
Thank you, Miss Carla, because you know I don't understand technology and I'm using John's phone. I'm really in trouble tonight. I do want to say I'm so pleased that I was able to catch some of this. We're trying, can you believe it, to have a couple of days away. It's not going to work, but we're trying. And but I wouldn't have missed this for the world. And you too, Gwen, Dr. OmiSoore, you guys, you have brought tears to my eyes tonight. I celebrate your love, and I celebrate how good it has been to be your friend. And also, I really want to say, you know, Dr. OmiSoore, don't you you know how I am. Don't you be hiding your light under a bushel and saying, oh, they're just little things. You have done monumental work just by being who you are, by showing up in all of your identity, my darling. You have led the way that nobody else has led. And I want to say to you as well that you being there in the Faculty of Medicine has meant the world to us. We are so inspired by that. We're inspired by your leadership. Hawk will stand with you. We'll stand behind you, beside you. We're never in front of you, but always with you. And honestly, that work is setting the stage for many more wonderful things to come. So so you keep it up and never feel that we aren't just absolutely understanding the contribution that you're making and understanding what a pioneer you are. All kinds of love to you both. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Hold on. There, a heart for you.
Beautiful.
I'm so glad you and John got away. I'm so, you know, I think John's going to take the phone now and make you rest or something. But I hope we're able to enjoy some time. And I just love that we're on this journey together. Honestly, it really is. It's fantastic. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of a beautiful story. Beautiful, beautiful life. So the
Thank
floor is still
you.
open to anyone who wishes to ask any questions or have any comments.
Oh, thank you, Alicia Francis. Thank you, Sexual Health Network, or Sexual Health Nova Scotia. I agree with you, Carla. Gwen rocks like a boulder.
You're gonna make me blush now. Come on. I was holding it together. Now I'm gonna blush and cry and everything.
I keep thinking of the names I've missed of people who really, oh, I should also mention Don Oliver, Senator Don Oliver, and Her Honor Mayanne Francis. They, right from the beginning, Senator Oliver reached out to me and, you know, talked to me about the endowment. And of course, he has a history about the endowment with the Johnston Chair that I just don't have. And Lynn Jones was one that told me about Rocky's involvement as well. And Rocky died just before I moved to Nova Scotia, so didn't have an opportunity to meet him. And then, of course, Her Honor Mayanne Francis came to one of the very first lectures I gave in the chair with the Health Law Institute. And I was talking about health protocols of blood donation, and it has continued to be just a great support and sounding board. And again, you know, I also respect those difficult conversations and folks who are like, let's talk more about why you made this decision or that decision, because we're not islands, you know what I mean? Like, we're not in this by ourselves, like we're part of a larger tapestry. And I think I believe in each one, teach one. I believe in, as you go forward, you bring somebody with you. That's what happened with me. Like those hard conversations with Faith and Dion and Laleiti, like they were hard conversations. They insisted that I have an opinion about something that was thought out. and really stuck with me and supported me in that. And that's what I think allows you to kind of grow and to learn and know your own voice. And some of the hardest things we could do is learn and know our own voice. Yeah. So, question, wondering if your activist work with York is published online. So there's a new book coming out called Nuances of Blackness. Is that what it's called? Nuances of Blackness.
Yes, I believe so. Yep. Yep.
It's just, Nuances of Blackness in the Canadian Academy by University of Toronto Press. Dr. Melinda Smith is one of the editors of that book, along with Dr. Handel Wright, who's at UBC. I have a chapter in that book talking about my time at York, talking about the Center for Race and Ethnic Relations, talking about my shift in understanding from, these systems really want us, they just don't know how, to, oh no, these systems were structured in a way that they don't want us. So how can we be more strategic about lessening the harm that we experience within these various systems? So I know that sounds, ultimately what I wrote about was, what some of the difficulties we found in doing anti-racism work in a university, but why it was important, because we will always have our youth want to go to university. So our youth will want to do a lot of things. And part of one of the things they'll want to do is going to university. So how can we make sure or work to make sure that their time in university is not painful, that they get to go to university and just be a student, and study and have fun and meet people. And so that's being published. Oh, that's published this month. And there's a book launch. I'm not participating in the book launch, but there's a book launch for Nuances of Blackness happening, I think, the end of this month or in February. I tweeted about it. And so, but I have a chapter in that book. And that's
I'm now following you on Twitter.
Oh.
So I just want to say that I'm a social worker and I'm new to Halifax, but I lived in Whitney Pier. And I appreciate all the information that you gave tonight. You're super inspirational, and I definitely will be purchasing that book. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. I see so many familiar faces. Hi, everyone.
I just want to say thank you for all that you do. If you can hear me.
I can.
It's amazing that you're doing all the work you're doing, especially Black health and medicine, because I've had experiences myself. The most recent one being my niece being in pain and not being addressed because they think you're Black, you could deal with pain. And she went through a lot of pain that could have been avoided if they just paid a little bit more attention to the fact that she is human and can have pain like everybody else. And it took a lot for them to really deal with, be able to handle how much pain she was going through and give her what she needed. But I think we cannot talk enough about cultural competency and knowing that you're Black doesn't mean you cannot feel everything else that everybody else feels. So wonderful work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's the thing I think I want us to think about, when Betsy and Anarcha, they were the enslaved Black women that were being experimented on by J. Marion Sims, who's the father of gynecology. And he did that in front of other people, having them on all fours. And he did it without giving them any pain management that was available at the time. And so we hear a lot about generational trauma. And I think we have in our own kind of DNA this sense that we're supposed to manage our pain in a particular way that comes out of this kind of generational trauma. And in medicine, as you say, it's often now written as, oh, we're just better with pain. We're more resilient with pain. Our nerve endings are duller. And that's not the case. I think we were, if we think about our trajectory through slavery, we were kind of beaten into, needing to deal with pain. And then not all of us come through slavery, we come through different places. And so some of the greatest challenges is is saying to people that pain management with Black people needs an equity lens, needs a Black focused lens. And we also need to think about the types of how we facilitate pain management in our communities, especially for youth. So my mom was really instrumental in intervening when I was in pain as a child. And I worked to help her when she was in pain. It always took more than one person to kind of do that work. So congratulations to you for advocating for your child. We should never, ever have to deal with pain in that way. It just makes healing take so much longer. So congratulations. I know it must be so difficult to see your child in pain, and then to have to fight on their behalf to make sure that they get some relief. And then you have a child looking at you saying, please help me. Like, these are the things that break our hearts, right? So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Beautiful. Any more questions as we tie down the evening? I think we made it through with power.
Terry,
So
did
I
you have a
just wanted to
question?
say hello. I was at a DEC meeting for social work for most of the evening, but I'm glad that I got to see you and hear some of the rich wisdom that you shared tonight. And I miss you both, and I'm hoping we can share a meal in person soon. And one of the things that you just had brought up, we were having a rich conversation tonight about the title of the panel discussion was how to fit Afrocentric perspectives into social work education and the implications of even having to ask that question. And so it'll be really good to continue just knowing you, but also working with you to help improve the fundamentals of the curriculum at Dalhousie.
You need to introduce yourself. Tell people who you are.
Hi, Dr. Terry Lewis. I'm the undergrad coordinator in the School of Social Work, an associate professor over there, and I am privileged to know Dr. Dryden and Gwen, and I'm just delighted to be able to be in this space for just a little bit. I know you're running towards the end, but I look forward to us chatting more about how we can change literally the curriculum. So,
you know, listen, once Gwen and I are out of isolation, yes, that we could do a meal. We're out of isolation, I think Saturday night. We're so excited. We might just go for a walk across the street.
It's great to see you. It's great to see Jem.
Yeah,
as well.
it's good to
Hi,
see
Jem.
you again. Damon, hi. Thank you. Thank you, Carla, for posting that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Dwayne and Elizabeth, for inviting me, for including me on this beautiful list, honestly.
You're amazing. You're absolutely amazing. And thank you, Dr. Dryden, and thank you, Gwen, for giving us your time.
Of course.
I hope we do work together, and let's combat some of this nastiness in this world.
Yes, please.
Thank you,
Please.
Dwayne, for doing this.
Of course, my pleasure.
Beautiful. Well, hope everyone has a pleasant evening, and
Good
everyone
night.
has power.
Good night, everyone. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you. You too.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.